Hi, and welcome to Leaders of the Jewel City. I'm Rich Wells, the Public Information Officer for the City of Glendale. Leaders of the Jewel City gives you an inside look into the decisions that help shape our city through the eyes of former mayors. In the coming months, we'll talk with these former city leaders about issues and projects they worked on during their term in office. Our guest this month is Larry Zarian, who served on the City Council from 1983 to 1999. Zarian held the position of mayor from 1986 to 1987, 1990 to 1991, 1993 to 1994, and 1997 to 1998. Larry, I'd like to thank you for inviting us into your home today.
I'm very happy that you're here, Rich, and I want to compliment the city. Compliment you for doing what you're doing, recording, and so our archives will have a history of our former leaders. Often people have asked me questions, who were the leaders? Who is Carol Parcher? And who is Ginger Bremberg? We have very little to show. I've asked for this for some 25 years, and there's always been a rejection. I'm thrilled that finally we're doing this. It's important that we show our future generations who were the people that ran the city of Glendale, and it's important. And I am very happy to be here with you and to tell you that when I decided to run for city council, I lived in the city, I grew up in the city, and I found that we have one of the greatest cities in the nation. And I decided to run for city council. I saw what our former leaders had done. I just wanted to take the baton and run and see if I could make the city better. Were there needs for changes? Yes, but our former leaders had done a great job, and I was thankful. And the least I could do is to put in my time and give all I had. And I'm thrilled that I can be sitting here with you to answer some questions and to be a part of this process.
Well, Larry, you served many terms on the City Council. You accomplished a number of things. Let's talk about while you were on the council. What was the makeup of some of the different councils that you sat on?
Oh, wow. During the 16 years as council member, 4 terms as mayor, I served with several very good people. I served with Carol Parcher, Ginger Bremberg, Jerry Milner, Jack Day, and of course myself. That was the first term, and then subsequently I served with Sheldon Baker, Eileen Givens, Rick Reyes, Dick Jutra, Marianne Plumley, and then David Weaver. I think that's the number.
That's a lot to remember.
That's a lot to remember, yeah. And I served with several, and we accomplished a whole lot.
And you had several city managers that you worked with. Let's talk about them.
We sure did. I started out with McKinley. Then after Mr. McKinley was Jim Rez, Dave Ramsey, and then Jim Starberg. So I've served with 4 different city managers, 4 different leaders that ran the city in the way they thought was best for the city of Glendale.
And Larry, when you select a city manager, you obviously had to go through several selection processes. Talk about that and talk about the importance of getting a good city manager.
It is a difficult one because you are hiring the leader of the city. You're hiring the person that's going to run several thousand people. You want to find the very best candidate. It's an arduous process. It's one that you have to go through and select the best person that you know that is going to be the best city manager for the city. So you go on a national search, and especially for Glendale. Glendale is a much desired city. It has always been a much desired. It has always been a well-run city. So we get very good candidates. And to select the very best person is a tough one. And then when the selection gets down to the last 4 or 5, you find that each city council member has their own candidate that they want to hire for the city manager. And it's just a lot of give and take, a lot of private talk to each other and try to see what the city manager has done. It is a tough one. And the last selection took a long time, but I find that hiring Jim Starberg was the best selection, and he has proven it.
And every city manager has their own style, right?
They do. They do. Each city manager has their own style. And if you don't mind, I'll talk a little bit about the city manager. Mr. McKinley was a tough city manager, and he wanted every city council member to know that he was the boss. He ran the city. Everything went through him. And if we wanted to make contact with any one of the department heads, that we had to go through him, and he would make it happen. We, as council members, by our charter, we are the board of directors. We make the decision as to what the rules are going to be. We tell the city manager that these are the rules, and he or she follows through. They do the job. We are not happy with the way the city is run. We go to the city manager. We make changes to the city manager. And that's why it's important to hire the very best city manager. Jim Rez was the same type. Things began to change a little bit after Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey was a little more laissez-faire, and he said, if you want to go talk to the department heads and if you want to tell staff what to do and all this, you can go ahead and do that. That changed the process, and I was not happy with that. I think that our city manager, form of government, ought to remain as that. The city manager is the boss. He runs the city, that the city employees work for him or her, and that if a city council member wants to go to department head, they ought to go through the city manager, because there isn't a department head or a city employee that wants to have 6 bosses. And I think the process works much better that way. Staff is not nervous. They don't know what, and then each city council member has a different thing that they're asking. Then staff, who are they going to respond to? And I think we ought to go back to the city manager form of government, and I think we're doing some of that now, but I know it ought to go back to that. The boss of the city is the city manager.
Now, Larry, you were on the council several terms. Give us, if you can, a snapshot of Glendale when you came into office and some of the years you were on the council. Give us a look at Glendale back then.
Glendale has always been known as a bedroom city, an urban village, and it remained that way for many, many years. The Galleria changed this thing. The Galleria, there was controversy about the Galleria. People didn't want the Galleria. There were those opposed to it, all that. Galleria 1 changed that. It brought hundreds of thousands of people to the city. But then it had its reverse. It had its downside. Once that happened, once the Galleria came in, then we had a lot of empty stores on Brand Boulevard. A lot of Brand Boulevard businesses went into the Galleria. People were concerned, and some said, well, we told you so. But then the Galleria brought a boon. They brought so many people to Glendale that it made Brand Boulevard more attractive. Smaller businesses began to open, and then, of course, Galleria 2. You know, I always tease people, and I say that I have a question that maybe you can respond. Do more people go through Disneyland or the Gallerias? And typically people say Disneyland, but the truth is that more people go through, more people shop and go through both Gallerias than they do Disneyland. We bring a lot of people. And now the Americana, another boon to the city, another tax producer. Good things have happened to Glendale. We are very, very fortunate. And Rich, I must tell you that when we were thinking about Galleria 1, the city of Burbank was courting the Galleria people. They wanted the Galleria. Had we not reacted, had we not signed the documents within a very short period, and this was during Mr. Keithley's time, that we would have lost the Galleria. They would have gone to the neighboring city. And we've always been vigilant. We've always felt that Burbank and Pasadena are competitors, and they are competitors. And we are very fortunate that the Galleria came to Glendale, the Americana subsequent to that, and look what has happened. One of the most desired cities in the state of California, if not the nation.
Larry, I'm sure you had many challenges during your years in office. Can you talk about some of those challenges you faced?
Yeah, the challenges, the first challenges that I, as one councilman, was the growth of the city. Glendale became very important. Glendale became a city that many builders wanted to come to, building apartment buildings, and then commercial became very important because of our proximity and all. Within a very short period, within a 4-year period, the city grew by 40,000. And that was just before we could even control. That was one of the challenges. What do we do with the city? Do we allow it to grow to its potential, or do we stop it? So we, as council, and we were all at the forefront of this, we wanted to do this. We downzoned the city several times to keep a lid on the potential growth of the city, and that was a very wise decision. But then we became a desired city for the commercial people. Many offices wanted to come and build office buildings, and that was a boon for the city. And we became one of the most desired cities in the state of California and the nation because we were so business friendly. You could do business in Glendale, and we hope that we will continue doing that. If business doesn't come, where do the tax dollars come? The city doesn't print any money. We only get our money through tax, and so we have to be careful, but at the same time, Rich, we have to make sure that we don't put a stop on total development, because then that doesn't bring any more business, and it is the people that work in those office buildings, people that work in those shops, that go to the restaurants, that go to shop in the Galleria, in the Americana. They all work hand in hand. So we have to be controlled, but we have to be careful.
What were some of the other challenges you faced, Larry?
Well, the other challenges were that we needed to make sure that our budget was in line, that we didn't spend monies we didn't have. Glendale has always been known as a frugal city. We didn't spend our reserves, and we need to be careful with that. We need to make sure that reserves are in place, that every time we want to do something, we don't say we have money in the reserves. The reserves are for a rainy day. Those are some of the challenges, and the city council was aware of that we had a process that we set aside money. We didn't touch it, only for a rainy day. And I'm seeing that's not happening very much right now, and we need to be careful with that. That was a challenge. The other challenges were our hillside. We needed our hillside ordinance, and we had, the city council was very diverse. There were some council members that wanted total development. Open up the hills and build anything that you want, as many homes as you want. And then we had council members that didn't want any development. We had to compromise. It was a challenge to bring the city council together. And fortunately, with the letter Z, I always voted last. So I had an opportunity to somehow do this. And in that instance, I broke the tie. We have low density and the hillside ordinance still in place, and we're very careful. So that was a challenge also. It was something that we had to work with. We as council members argued with each other on the hillside ordinance, on a whole lot of things. And yet at the end of the day, we realized that's only one vote. Each one of us are trying to do the best that we can for the city. And after the vote was in, we were done. We went on to the next subject, and we were friends. We went out to dinner together, and we went out to do what was best for the city. The challenges were traffic, and we had to control that also, and make sure that, as I said earlier, that we had a balanced budget every year, and we had a city that was frugal. We only spend monies that we had.
Hillside ordinance was a very difficult decision. Can you remember some other decisions that really stick out in your mind you think were really tough?
Well, the decisions that were tough also, that we had a difference of opinion as to what we were going to do with the piece of property on the corner of Brand and Glen Oaks. There was a suggestion that we build a 12-story building on the site that the Nestle building sits. Someone that we knew was bringing us plans for a 12-story building on that huge piece of land, and yet once they built the 12-story building, that was going to leave a triangular piece of property right by the wash vacant. I saw that as an eyesore in the city of Glendale, because in those days they were throwing tires and trash and all this on this vacant land, and it didn't cover the wash. Some of my colleagues wanted to build a 12-story building. At that time, I had a vision of that property being something else. So with the help of Ray Edwards at that time, the chairman of Glendale Federal, we sat down with him along with Susan Schick, our director of redevelopment. We looked at that piece of property again, and I had a tough time convincing my colleagues that we ought to do more. They were trying to do the right thing, But the convincing colleagues to move from one issue to the other was a difficult one. I was able to sway a couple of the council members, and then we stopped the development of the 12-story building, and the rest is history. Ray Edwards brought all that property. He partnered with Lincoln Properties, and then Lincoln Properties was able to make a deal with Nestle. Otherwise, today we would have had a vacant land and a 12-story building. It was a challenge. It takes a lot of work to work with council members to be convinced and to convince. And so that was one of the major ones. To again try to go and work with. We in those days went out and talked to CEOs and chairmen of the board of many of the major companies to convince them to come to Glendale. Glendale at one time was the third largest financial center in the state of California. Glendale was, and maybe still is, the largest title companies that are home. IHOP was a difficult one. We brought IHOP to Glendale. So those were all challenges, working and dealing with decision makers to come to Glendale, because we knew the only way the city is going to survive is through tax dollars.
Larry, what do you consider to be some of your greatest accomplishments?
Well, I must say, and I've always said, and I will again, that it doesn't matter what ideas a city council person has, what challenges they have, what ideas they have for a community. In order for that to be accomplished, you need 3 votes, which means you have to work with your colleagues. No one council member is an island. You can have a great idea, and you can mention it to your colleagues. If they don't go along with you, you've got nothing. And so we were able to work with each other and try to do the best we could for the city. Some of the things that I'm proud of, one is the code enforcement that we have in Glendale. At one time, when I first got elected, when there were problems, people were doing wrong things, doing business out of their homes, or repairing their cars and tires and all of those things in their front lawn and all this, it was by call. If somebody called and complained, we went out and did something about it. And that was unacceptable. I saw a building in Glendale one time by just driving around the city on South Central. I saw an apartment building, Rich, where I walked up and I saw young children and families living in one room. When I walked into the apartments, I saw cockroaches and rats running around and trash being picked up. That was unacceptable to me. I went back to the city council. I was new, a lot of energy, and I had to get things accomplished. I took some of my colleagues to that same place and I said, folks, if this is your city, is this what we want? Are we going to live like this? There are many more places like this. And these people had complained to the landlord only because they were afraid to turn the landlord in, was because the landlord would have raised their rent if he would have done anything. And so they lived with those roaches. My colleagues agreed with me. We started code enforcement, and today we don't allow those kinds of buildings. We don't allow people to work out of their homes illegally. We don't allow people to repair cars in their front lawns. We don't allow landlords to take advantage of their tenants. And so we have a great code enforcement, and we have a clean city. We have zero tolerance for graffiti. There aren't too many cities that do that. We go out and do this. If there's graffiti, the parents are responsible. The business that does, they've got, or we go ahead and clean the graffiti and charge them. That's the kind of a city we ought to have, and we do have today. And so, as I said, each council has their own unique challenges, and each does the best they can. The other thing that I'm very proud of, Rich, is that for years we had Memorial Day services, but all we had is that globe in front of the City Hall. And we gathered there, and I thought to myself, a big city of 200,000 not have a Veterans Memorial, that's unacceptable. So as mayor, I coordinated and brought everyone together, the fire department, police, the city employees, and many of the organizations got the approval of the city council, and I started the Veterans Memorial. I'm very, very proud of that. And then, of course, the Love Ride with Jay Leno and all that, that started during my time, and it's ongoing still. And the auto show that we have every year on Brand Boulevard. It started during my term, and again with the acceptance cooperation, and so those are some of the things that I'm very proud of, and many more. Each vote counts. Each one is a big one. I mentioned the Nestle building. So each council member looks back and says, "This is what I'm proud of. This is what we did," and I just was a part of that.
Larry, as you look back on your time in office, is there any time you say, you know, if I had to do it all over again, I might change that? Do you ever get that feeling?
We all do. We all talk about what else we could have done. One of the things that I feel I possibly should have pushed even more than I did was additional police. Although we are one of the safest cities in the United States, cities our size, but I think the load on our police department is too heavy. We ask them to do much more than they do. I should have worked harder to see if we could hire more police officers. We always seem to have money for a whole lot of other things, and cost overruns and all that. If we were more frugal and we moved things around, we could have added another 10, 15, 20 more police officers, and I would have felt much better. There aren't too many things that I look back and I say to myself, we could have done, we should have done. And of course, one of the other things that I think that I was a part of, and the saving of the Alex Theater. The council was split. Some council members wanted to just torn down, and some council members didn't want to spend the money. And this is not finger pointing. We took a trip to Portland, and we saw the Paramount Theater in Portland, amazing theater. And I thought to myself, this is what we can have in Glendale, and we did. And look at it, it's a wonderful place, wonderful venue. We're proud of how many cities can say they have an Alex Theater, and we do in the city. And that's another plus for the city. But other than the police and maybe if I had to do it over again, I think we should have stopped the overdevelopment in the city during the 4-year period that I'm talking about. We let the horse out of the barn before we closed the door, and going back to that, and more open space in the southern part of Glendale. And we should have asked the developers to chip in a little bit more money, or more money, in order for us to have more open space. And we're paying the price today.
A lot of your colleagues that I've talked to, Larry, have listed a couple of things that stand out in their mind that occurred while they were in office. One of them was the tragic death of Officer Lazaretto. Do you remember that?
I remember that. I was the mayor then. It was a tragic time when I got the call that he had been shot. It was an unfortunate thing. The city was in sorrow. But looking at the family, looking at the Lazaretto kids, was a tearjerker. It was, I spent a lot of time with the family, and it was a loss that we still remember today. It was something that, and of course, another accident during the fires when Fireman Jensen was burned. Again, I was the mayor, and it just seemed like every time I was mayor, there was a tragedy that happened in the city. That was a tragic situation. We almost lost him, and Fireman French during the same. And those were the tragic things that happened. But the city converged, Rich. All of the council members, the city manager, we all came together. And we had buttons made. We went out and we held hands with Mrs. Lazaretto and the children, and the police department did a magnificent job. We are a community that, as diverse as we are, we come together when tragedy happens. When happiness happens, we come together also. Look at the volunteers that we have. Look at the people that want to do what is right for this. You know why? Because we have a great city. And so when you think of those two tragic events, and probably more, you say to yourself, what a great city we have. Everyone wanted to help in every way. And the question was, what can we do for you? How can we help you? both in the Lazaretto and the Jameson case, and we have a wonderful city.
You touched on something there, Larry. Glendale is known for its volunteers. You want to talk about that for a second?
It's a great question, and I could spend hours talking about volunteers. What would we do if the city didn't have volunteers, the hospitals didn't have the volunteers? We could not operate our hospitals today without volunteers. People that go out on a paint out day, the hundreds of people that come out to paint out graffiti, you send a message and people want to come and serve. Look at our commissioners; they don't get paid. This is why I think that if we go back to the city manager form of government, there would not be. I worked, so did Eileen and Ginger. We worked 65 hours a week at a very low pay. Our pay was virtually nothing compared to today. At one time, council members only got $50 per meeting. Then when I got elected, it became something like $3,000–4,000 a year. And we spent a lot of time doing that because we wanted to. We were volunteers. It wasn't a job. It was volunteer. We had a city manager that ran the city, and we gave the orders to the city manager. And the city comes together. We have volunteers that want to do anything that you want. As I mentioned earlier, our commissioners do a magnificent job, spend a lot of time as volunteers. We are a volunteer city.
Mm-hmm. Larry, there's always those moments that you look back with a chuckle, and there are the humorous moments. Can you remember anything offhand?
One of the most humorous things that I remember is when I turned 50, and my colleagues decided to surprise me with a whole lot of things, presents that were funny and all that. They built a sign that showed Brand Boulevard with a slash that said Zarian Way. And then they made the city logo and they changed everything, put my picture on it. And of course, the fun thing in Glendale has always been that when someone asks who was the mayor at a certain period, whether it was in 1934 or 47, and my colleagues always say, Zarian was the mayor then. And so this logo shows that in the year 1906, and Mayor Larry Zarian at that 1906. That was one of the funniest, humorous things that I remember that happened to me. We always played games with each other, and yet when business time came, when the gavel came down, we were all serious, and we did business for the city of Glendale. But there was camaraderie, there was fun, and we turned things. They put a hat on my head as if I was the king, and put a robe around me and all this. And those were funny days, Rich. Wonderful days. I've had 16 years of fun, chuckles, serious, making decisions, looking to the future of Glendale. And when I left, I wanted to pass the baton of a great city because somebody else handed me a baton to lead. And when my intention wasn't to stay there for 16 years, but then it just turned out that way. And then, of course, my years on the Metro, being the chairman of MTA for 2 years, it brought a lot of clout to the city of Glendale. It wasn't funny, but those were the good days. We brought that, serving on the Metrolink board, and those kinds of things are very, very important to the city.
Larry, you mentioned the MTA, and my next question for you kind of transitions into something completely related to that, and that is, what are you doing today? I know you're still very involved with transportation issues.
I am. Not only do I do my weekly television program on Channel 280 every Thursday, and why do I do that? Because I want to keep my tie in my hands in the city, because I love the city, and every way that I can highlight our city leaders, interviewing our police chief, our city manager, department heads, and let the city see for a full hour what they do. And that's one of my passions, and that's what I do. I was fortunate. Governor Schwarzenegger, appointed me 4 years ago to the State Transportation Commission, a very high-powered commission. We brought in millions of dollars to the city of Glendale and to this region, and to the state of California also. Transportation happens to be my passion. Prior to being on the California Transportation Commission, if you remember, I was chairman of the MTA. I served on the MTA for 6 years, and Zarian is serving in my capacity today, and that brings a lot of clout to the city of Glendale. Right. Then I served 6 years on the Metrolink board also. If we don't solve our transportation problems for the state of California, it's bad for the commerce, and transportation issues are big in the city of Glendale. And I am involved. I'm involved as a volunteer with many organizations, also with the Glendale Adventist Hospital and many charitable organizations. I believe when we talked about volunteerism, none of the things that I do today has to do with money. It's all volunteer work. When there is money, you have to do things. Today I do things that I love doing. Today I do things that I enjoy doing. And volunteerism is still in my blood, and it will continue to be that. Rich, we have a great city. We have a great state. And if each one of us did just a little bit, we can't sit home and just ask for things to happen. We have to get out there and do it. And money is not always the answer. The answer is, what do you do for your community to make it better so you can hand a great community to somebody else? You and I don't do it, who is? We can't always say, let somebody else do it. And that's why I stay busy. And I stay busy, and I will continue to stay busy, because I grew up in the city and I love the city.
You're keeping very busy, Larry. What else do you do in your retirement? What do you do for enjoyment?
My volunteerism is enjoyment. I have a nice family. I have 3 sons. My 3 sons are very involved in the entertainment business. 2 of them are. The oldest one is a businessman. My greatest joy is my grandson now. I have another one coming, and with a lot of friends. I keep in touch with many friends, old-time friends, those that I grew up with. Those are my joys. I have a nice place, and I have friends come over. I go to meet with a lot of friends also, and keeping busy and keeping in touch with the city people like yourself and others, and doing these kinds of things are what gives me an opportunity to get to my office every morning at 7 o'clock, get home by 6 o'clock in the evening, and feel fulfilled that I've done something that's productive.
Larry, how would you like to be remembered?
That's a tough one. I like to be remembered as a good citizen, someone that wanted to do everything that he could to make his community better. I want people to think of me that I gave unselfishly. I didn't look for anything in return. I gave everything that I had for my family, to my family, and I gave every time that my city and responsibilities came along, or the state, or my nation. I've served our nation. I served on the state, on the National Highway Safety Commission. Whenever that call came, I want to remember that I answered the call, and I did it because I love this country. Here's an immigrant kid that came to the country, and the only way I know how to thank America for giving me the opportunities in education, in business. I've been successful in business, and I've been successful in the public sector. Every goal that I have set, Rich, I've reached. And where else could I have done it? And I want to be remembered that I turned out to be a good American, giving everything I had to my community.
Well, Larry, I want to thank you for your years of service and for inviting us in to talk with you today and relive some of those great memories, and to share your experiences with us. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure the people watching at home today did as well, and I want to thank you for being with us today.
Rich, I can't thank you enough and the city for wanting to do this. And I think we're doing something that's historic, something that is going to be remembered for a long time. I want to thank the city for giving me this opportunity.